Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the meeting of the Lincolnshire Waste Partnership. I will now ask members and officers to confirm their presence. When your name is called, please just unmute your microphone and say present. Councillor McNally, Lincolnshire County Council.
Present.
Councillor Bushell, City of Lincoln Council.
Good morning, present.
Councillor Foster from East Lindsey District Council.
Present.
Councillor Head from North Kesteven District Council.
Present.
Councillor Gamber-Jones from South Holland District Council.
Present.
Councillor Dr Mosley from South Kesteven District Council.
Present.
Councillor Bealey from West Lindsey District Council. Councillor Bealey, are you there?
Good morning. Yes, I am present.
Thank you. Councillor Wright from Lincolnshire Leaders and Chief Executives.
Present.
And we have the following officers present. Mike Reid from Lincolnshire County Council.
Present.
Matthew Mitchell from Lincolnshire County Council.
Present.
Rachel Stamp, Lincolnshire County Council.
Present.
Steve Bird from City of Lincoln Council.
Present.
Victoria Burgess from East Lindsey District Council.
Councillor Foster, can I pass apologies to Victoria, please?
Yes, thank you. David Steels, North Kesteven District Council.
Present.
Do we have Emily Spicer or Charlotte Payne from South Holland?
No, I give apologies for Charlotte Payne, please.
Thank you. Gary Smith from South Kesteven.
Present.
Thank you. And Adi Selby from West Lindsey District Council.
I'm present.
We also have Councillor Tyrrell from Lincolnshire County Council, Executive Support Councillor for Waste and Trading Standards, in attendance and as an observer. Is there anyone in attendance who has not had their name called?
Only me, I'm an observer.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. We will now move to agenda item 1, which is election of chairman. I'd now like to invite nominations for the position of chairman for the year 2021 to 22.
Nominate Councillor McNally, please.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Seconded.
Can I? I'm Bailey, West Lindsey District Council. Thank you.
Are there any other nominations? No. Can I ask all members to switch on their cameras and officers to switch off their cameras, and ask all those in favour to raise your hand so that I can see. Yep. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Councillor Bushell, can you put your camera on, please?
You can vote for yourself, Nanny.
Thank you. I think that's unanimous. Thank you. Councillor McNally, over to you.
You're on mute, Danny. You're still on mute, Danny.
I'll start again. Sorry. So yeah, going on to item 2, election of vice chairman. Do we have any nominations?
I'd like to propose Councillor Wright for the position of vice chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Braley.
Sorry, Chairman. I'm happy to second the nomination for Councillor Wright. Thank you.
Thank you. So, seeing no other nominations being put forward, all those in favour? Oh, could you put your cameras on, sorry. Unanimous. Welcome, Councillor Wright.
Thank you.
Where are we now? So next one, apologies for absence. Rachel, have we got any apologies?
We do. We have received apologies from Councillor Deborah Evans from Boston Borough Council.
Okay.
And again, could I reiterate Victoria Burgess from East London?
Yeah. Declaration of interest. Anyone got any declarations? I see none. Minutes of the meeting of the last partnership. Anyone who was there or a voting member or whatever.
Chairman, I was present and I'm happy to move that those are accepted as a true record. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Councillor Mosley, I'm happy to second those. I was present.
Thank you. All happy? Yeah, that'll do. And so they're accepted as a true record. So partner updates is the next one. Has anyone got any updates for anything on what's been going on? Councillor Gamber-Jones. Roger.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I get into the update, I don't think we can move on without thanking your predecessor, Eddie Pole, for all of the work that he did as our previous chairman. I know he had a slightly unorthodox way of doing things, but I think he made significant steps on behalf of the partnership and the way things were being done, and a lot of the progress that we made as a partnership, a lot of things that we achieved, and a lot of our successes in becoming a lot more inclusive, and a lot more discussions between ourselves as members were achieved through the way Eddie did business. And I'd like to go on record as thanking him for the work that he did during his time as our chairman. With respect to the key issues within South Holland, and I suspect that this is reflected not just with other partners, but nationally across local government, and certainly within the industry, is the challenge that we're now experiencing with Class 2 drivers. And whilst it is reflected specifically on ensuring that we continue to achieve our daily rounds, it isn't just impacting ensuring that we do that. It has an impact on the whole service, because it requires us to take people away from their supervisory roles. And that is concerning to me as a portfolio holder, in the fact that we're not able to carry out effective management as time goes on. If you take somebody away from overseeing the operations of your service as a whole, then inevitably it will impact the delivery of those services. And we are in a position where we will start to see a degradation. And it's not something we can fix easily, because whereas previously we were able to go to agencies to fill the gap, they are now telling us they don't have the people to send in, because those people themselves are being taken into private sector jobs where the pay is much more lucrative. And in fact, they're finding positions where the start pay is now 30,000 a year, which I'm sure many of us will only hope to achieve, and can never, at this point in time, believe is possible within local government. Maybe down in the London boroughs, but certainly not within rural areas like ours at the present time. The hourly rates don't get anywhere near that. So I'm sure we need to look at this as a partnership and consider how we're going to overcome it. Driver training is one thing, incentives going forward, and a more long-term view of how we grow our own. It's certainly something that I've just seen a draft report on, and that I'd be pushing forward with our own executive, and has been acknowledged. But because of the time it takes to train drivers, it actually is not delivered easily or quickly. So it will have a short-term impact on services. And I think we need to acknowledge that and be prepared to deal with some public response, negative response in the short term. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. And just going back to Eddie, his way was slightly unorthodox, but I quite liked it myself, really. And I think he does want to go on record, really, what he did and everything. And on the Class 2 drivers, I know we're having problems ourselves with some of the skips that moving from the HWRCs. I think Mike was saying Biffa are struggling to get some of the drivers, so it's the whole system that's at fault at the minute. Councillor Brearley.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And congratulations on your election, and congratulations on the election of the Vice Chairman as well. It is a real privilege to be a member of this partnership. I think it's gained real momentum and pace. There's never been a more important time for the issues within the remit of the partnership. And so I absolutely want to associate myself with Councillor Gamba-Jones' comments about Councillor Pole. He did a tremendous job, but I would also go further, and we always achieve more in partnership. That is the nature of local government, isn't it? All aspects of life, but I wanted to particularly thank Councillor Gamba-Jones as well for his service as Vice Chairman, which has been exemplary. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Bailey's just beat me to it in saying thank you to Roger, because Roger was very kind about Eddie, but as you say, it takes teamwork. But just on the driver thing, then I think it's going to be something that's got to go right up our risk registers for all of us. I've got a couple of friends who are retired from their jobs now, and they can make a very lucrative addition to their pension with the fact that they're fully licensed drivers, and they can dip in and dip out because of there is a need. So they can pick and choose, how few or how many hours they work, basically. So it is a bit of a worry. And with the reference to Eddie, then whether he's orthodox or unorthodox, I think the main thing to take forward is partnership. The only way we're going to succeed in anything is all working together. And we've got some, with some heavy spectres on the horizon with the Environment Bill and the things that are being already promulgated through the press to try and excite our residents, whether they're true or not, with regards to extra bins and how we're going to be dealing with waste. So the only way that we can deal with all of that, and there's going to be a big pull on us as local authorities, both financially and organisationally, is by holding to that. What I think, having been with the partnership for many years now, is the fact is that we did pull more together in the last 2 or 3 years than we have in all the time before then. So I'm sure, Mr. Chairman, you'll want to continue that.
Yeah, totally right. Thank you, Councillor Wright. Going back to Roger, yeah. I'd class them as Batman and Robin, but without the active running. Oh, Eddie and Roger. Councillor Mosley.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor McNally, and yeah, I'll add to my congratulations for your election to the chairmanship and for your promotion to the executive on the county council. Well done. It seems not so long ago, in fact, that we were sat down at the depot at Alexandra Road, kneeling down in front of food waste caddies. Do you remember that? Yeah, so
At least you want in front of the lorry.
yeah, that's that's exactly it. So you know, it's all coming together, and obviously congratulations also to Councillor Wright, who I'm sure will be a worthy vice chairman of the committee. And I'll add my sentiments to and thanks to Eddie and Roger for their hard work over the past few years. I do believe, I think it is normally customary. It was customary in the past to go around the districts on updates, and I just thought I'd just throw in a few things from South Kesteven that you may well have heard of. So we're very lucky to have been able to acquire a new site for for a new depot. For South Kesteven, bearing in mind the operational constraints and the growth ambitions, we were running out of space at Alexandra Road. I know it's not an ideal site for either LCC or SKDC in that respect, being right in the middle of a housing estate. So obviously we're pushing that one forward. I echo the sentiments about drivers. I think that extends further than drivers. I think it extends across the entire service. I think we're likely to see a huge amount of wage inflation in the next few months and years, and because of scarce resource, because of various issues. The drivers is the acute one at the moment. We found that mechanics is also an acute strain. There's a lot of demand for HGV drivers across the piece, and of course the support services for those are also impacted. I don't think there's anything else. I think Gary will probably pitch in if you do go around the offices on the updates, but I'll leave it at that one. And I really hope that the partnership goes from strength to strength in the next few years.
Thank you. Councillor Foster, I think, is it? Yeah, Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, congratulations to yourself as Chair and Vice, and also my thanks to Councillor Pole and Councillor Gamble-Jones for their past duty. Just following on from the driver situation, we use Bring sites for our glass collection, and these are serviced by Glass Recycling UK. And these in turn have had their driver issues, unable to recruit, and with the overwhelming amount of glass that we've seen arriving at our Bring sites, we have been struggling to keep abreast of everything. We've had to supplement with our own collections because they have the large domed bins which are lifted and need specific drivers to look after those and operate them. We're getting back to normal now. Our glass bins are being emptied. I think they've managed to recruit 1 or 2 new drivers. But we in the dilemma at the moment as what to do with Bring sites versus curbside collection. And obviously we will await any directive on that before we jump in one direction or another. So it's a little bit tricky situation because we've seen the consequences of what happened with having the large Bring bottle banks at the moment. So we're obviously going to have to review that very quickly. And very quickly, since the last meeting, we've successfully introduced our own maintenance workshop. We've got a new maintenance manager who's really, really good, come from a commercial business. And we're now exploring commercial opportunities and the possibility of introducing mechanical apprenticeships, which I think goes back to what Councillor Mosley was also saying. So we see that as an opportunity. So I think things are going really well. One other thing that the waste manager has asked is, are people seeing an increase in bulky items? Because we've had to take on extra resource just to deal with the amount of fridges, washing machines, cookers. Everything seems to be coming to us at the moment. This is despite increasing our costs. We've still managed to make a go of things. So not everything is bad from that, but it was just wanting to know if everybody else is still seeing this increase in bulky waste. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Mosley?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Councillor Foster. Yeah, we've seen a doubling of bulky waste items, and we've doubled our service as well in that respect. I think it does relate to the new way of working at household waste recycling centres. In this way, it's almost rather than book a slot, they're booking a bulky collection for somebody to come and collect it rather than them take it themselves in some respects. But yes, we've seen an uplift in that, and in recent weeks we haven't seen it drop down at all. Whereas we have seen things like fly tipping start to head down in numbers, which would indicate that the relaxation of the items that you could take to household waste has had a slight but delayed impact on that. So I think there's still challenges ahead, but yeah, bulky items are very definitely still way up.
Out of interest, do you charge so much for so many items, or do you do it per item? Some people do it differently and stuff. So
yeah, I mean, Gary, I believe it's a higher amount for the first item, and then it's lower amount for subsequent items. And so things like fridges, freezers, mattresses, all of those kind of things. I mean, mattresses people tended to use. Use the bulky for that because they were just really difficult to get into the back of a car. But they could normally put a small fridge or freezer in if they wanted to go to the household waste recycling. Now I think they're just stocking them up on their premises and making making a big order and paying for the main one and then plus additionals.
Okay. So we're still on updates. Is there anyone else wants to partner update? David, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, just with regards to the issue of fly tipping and the work of the Environmental Crime Partnership, we updated at the last meeting. But Chairman, it was just an opportunity to request of you and of the other partners. We've had a letter from the chairman of Waste Away, which is part of the Herefordshire Waste Partnership. They're wanting to send a letter through to the Sentencing Council, looking at looking at a review of sentencing guidelines for offences related to fly tipping. This has come fairly recently, so I do apologise that we've not had a chance to share it with members, but I thought it was an opportunity as part of this update to look at the principle of it, and that the recommendation that I've put forward is that I share this with partners with a view to feeding back to yourself as to whether or not you want to support the inclusion of Lincolnshire Waste Partnership's name as part of this. There's a lot of technical stuff that's within the letter. As I say, I'll share it as part of it, but the overall ethos is about lobbying to try and increase the amounts of sentences and penalty noted.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Yeah, happy with that. I think I dare speak for everyone else and say they will be as well.
Good, much appreciated. Thank you.
Any other updates? Mr. Reid. Mike.
Sorry, apologies. Didn't switch my camera on. I'll take myself off on mute, so that's an inauspicious start. Firstly, I just want to congratulate Councillor McNally on his election to chairman. And I just want to introduce myself. I'm the new head of waste from Lincolnshire County Council, and it's a role that I'm very much relishing, looking forward to. I just want to confirm as well that Rachel Stamp, who was formerly the waste partnership manager servicing the partnership, is now joined LCC. For members that weren't aware of that, Rachel is now a permanent member of our structure as waste partnerships and project manager. It's possibly a loss to the partnership, but in retaining her skills and knowledge within LCC and the partnership, we still retain that massive amount of information that Rachel has and the skills that she has. So it's not a complete loss. She's still here representing the partnership and LCC. But one thing I wanted to just briefly update you on is the household waste recycling centre issue. And we are aware there are lots of discussions around the booking systems and how we operate at the HVRCs, and consequences, as have already been alluded to, with bulky collections and fly tipping. And one thing that we are looking at is whether or not to pull that booking system and revert back to the original model where uncontrolled access was allowed for members of the public to essentially come along and drop material off whenever they could, without having that pre-book slot. So that's something that is under review at the moment, and we're hopeful that we will have a decision in the next week or so. Once it's been through our scrutiny committee, we can put something out to the public as to what the actual proposal will be. So that's really the main thing I wanted to talk about, and just update members briefly that we are starting to look at anaerobic digestion and food waste disposal. Is something that we're looking at different technologies and what the possibilities are to reflect the government consultation changes, which are kind of inevitable. So that's something that we are starting to focus on, but we have more immediate issues at the moment. But anaerobic digestion and food waste is the next big thing that we are looking at. And it kind of follows on from the success of the twin stream rollout with the paper and card down in Boston, and that to be widened out later in the year. So that's something that obviously Rachel has been leading on, and can answer any questions if members have any questions. So yeah, I'll keep it as short as that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. I think first on the list I've got Roger, but first it was Councillor Mosley.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Manali. Yeah, I think we'd all be supportive of a relaxation in restrictions and making it easier for customers to get to household waste recycling centres. I think using the word uncontrolled, I don't think you need to go that far, because I think you should still have the ability to control who accesses your site with regards to the white van men and all of those kind of things, and obviously that's a decision that you as a county council have to make as to what you want to do there. I think it's a little obvious to us that those unregulated man in van people are part of a much wider problem in respect of that, and the solution to that might not be as clear cut. But like I said, I think we would welcome the removal of the booking system to encourage people to dispose of their waste responsibly. In terms of AD and food waste, I really appreciate what Mike said with regards to the county council looking into that. Obviously, South Kesteven did the food waste pilot, and in fact we're still collecting food waste on one of our rounds. We have a huge amount of experience with that, and we hope that the county council will work with us with our knowledge that we gained during that to aid a solution for the wider partnership. Just let us know how we can help on that one. We're very supportive, and our residents are very supportive of expanding food waste collection. There's a lot of support with residents for doing that. I'll leave that one there anyway.
Thank you. Roger.
Yeah. I suppose the biggest problem, and I think Spalding is probably the one that is the biggest thorn in the side of the county in many ways, because of the physical size of it, and the type of usage, and regrettably the leader of the county chose to single it out for comment, which was somewhat regrettable to say the least. But I do hope that the police are consulted with before any significant decision is made there, because they are the ones who ultimately have to deal with the issues at the time of high usage. And those issues involve traffic management and the impact on the A16 in extreme cases, because it does roll all the way back to the Enterprise Park and ultimately onto the A16, when people are so foolish as to decide to join the queue and keep joining the queue until the HGVs are unable to access the only way to their sites and to their factories in Westmarsh Road. And that is a problem that ultimately draws the resource of the police unnecessarily to deal with it. And they don't have those resources, as we all are very well aware. And the size of Westmarsh Road cannot be changed. I know that the county has tried in the past, and we are past that point where that investment is available, I suspect. And that isn't a situation that is unique to Spalding, I'm sure, regarding investment. And there is little we can do about that. And that will not be a popular view for the people of South Holland, I'm sure, because they are the ones who have been shouting the loudest about the booking system. And it is unfortunate that the residents of Lincolnshire choose to fly tip when they find it inconvenient to get into these HWRCs. Very regrettable indeed. But I pick up on Peter's point that uncontrolled is not the way forward. I do think that we have to deal with the cowboy builders, the unscrupulous ones who are misusing these household waste and recycling centres, and find a middle ground that ensures that they're used by householders and not by the shady dealers that are man in a van and all of that. So I hope that some work can be done before the brakes are taken off and the system is changed. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. I mean, you've probably picked up on a few bits really that, I mean, Mike will answer in a minute, but as far as the van's concerned, we were still going to hope to keep the permits if them and control the numbers that use the sites. And like I say, Spalding, I think Spalding and Lincoln are the ones that give us the most concern with traffic numbers. But there's a saying, isn't there? Be careful what you wish for. Well, I'll let Mike answer.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, in controlled, I did mean in relation to residents only, and we don't class trades or commercial in that same category. They shouldn't be using the sites, and hence, as Councillor just mentioned, we are looking to retain a permit system for pre-registration of larger vans and trailers, with an allocation for simply to keep it fair and to deter trades abuse. And the other issue that we will be considering as well is prejudging a decision on the booking system. Another issue is out of county users. which is probably more of an issue at locations like Gainsborough, Spalding, Grantham, where we're on the periphery of the county. We are very acutely aware that other neighbouring authorities still have restrictions in place, and so we don't want an influx of kind of out-of-county abuse coming in, people just nipping over the boundary and disposing of material at council taxpayers on their bill. So that's something that we're also looking to address. And yeah, it's going to be a challenge, but I think it's something that we want to keep on the good practice that we've demonstrated in the last 15 months with the controls. And just to come back to a previous point regarding Spalding, Spalding is an issue. It's not ideally located. However, we've had many conversations with the site operator that if there are any issues with vehicles queuing onto the main road, they immediately alert us and we will take a view whether or not the site should be closed, simply to prevent that safety hazard occurring. And it does occur quite frequently during particularly peak summer months with green waste being presented. We, not only as waste authority, but as highway authority, have a duty of care to make sure that the highway is kept safe and we are not creating any detrimental impact on that by what we do. So we are very mindful that if things do become hazardous due to queuing vehicles, then we have the right and the authority to close the site. And ultimately, it's about safety. So it's safety on the highway and also safety within the sites. So there's a balance to be struck, but it will be our judgment, and hopefully it doesn't escalate to a situation where the police are called, because we can make that judgment ourselves and hopefully not use up the police resources, which may not be around, may not be able to make a judgment, and we can react faster. So thank you.
Thanks, Mike. I think we'll go on to item number 7, which is governance review of the LWP terms of reference.
Excuse me, Chairman, before we go on, I did have I put my virtual hand up. I'd just like to.
Sorry, go on, go for it.
Sorry, I'll take the virtual hand down now before it gets too tired. There we go. Yeah, I might be the odd one out here in terms of the booking system for the household waste recycling centres. From the feedback that I get from residents that I've spoken to and from my own experience of the sites, I see benefits, not only that it reduces queuing for people at certain times of the day, it balances the flow through the sites, it gives the staff operating at those sites more of a chance to assist and control what's going through rather than the free-for-all. An issue that is more important, I think, is that on 2 days of the week, all of our sites are closed. And that to me is a problem, because that is channeling everybody's efforts into 5 days of the week. Maybe we should look at staggering the closure date so that not all sites are closed, and you could do that strategically so that, for example, here in North Kesteven, if the Boston site is closed on a Wednesday and a Thursday, maybe the Sleaford site shouldn't be. And same with Lincoln. That, I think, is more of an issue to residents, that sites are all closed on a specific day. But in terms of the booking system, I would like to see evidence that slots are entirely filled throughout the day, that people can't get to the recycling centres because the booking system is full or whatever, before we actually ditch it, because I thought it had worked quite well. As I say, for the feedback that I've had from residents in this area, the booking system has worked well. They've liked it. There's no queues. It's easy to get in, and if they need assistance from staff, they're there on hand to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Head. Did you want to come on any of them bits, Mike, or not?
Yes, just briefly regarding the days, that is something which is it's constantly under review again, and I think one thing that we need to be mindful of is that we have to deal with external contractors who have a limited pool of staff, and if they are operating several sites from one company, that can have a consequence if they are essentially operating 7 days a week for some parts of their team. So in closing for 2 days, I think it's realistic that be the case, that we allow some kind of breathing space, whether or not staggering so that some of the sites are open. You could go to a site any day of the week. There may be a legitimate argument for that. However, it's something that we will have to discuss with our contractors, because if for example, we've got one contractor who is managing 4 different sites, if 1 or 2 of his sites are open 7 days a week, then that could be logistically difficult, and ultimately it could be their side that isn't feasible, and also there may be a financial cost, a consequence to ourselves. So it's something we could reflect on. We can certainly consider. However, now may not be the time, because there are other things that we need to prioritise in terms of any changes which need to go forward. So that's all I really wanted to add on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Councillor Wright.
Thanks, Chairman. Well, I've got mixed views on the recycling centres now, because I know they've not worked as well in some places, but I know Sleaford has worked really well, and I monitor social media to what's being said, because we've been trying to track down on who the rogue dumpers are, and they're not all cowboy builders, as I think was quoted, Rog. Some of them are just, it's the white van mans that are making themselves available to take waste from people. But I think the amount of time we've just discussed this, what the implications are, what the implications to come from this will be, is all still about collecting more and more rubbish through these centres. Yes, a lot of it is recycled if it's recyclable, but an awful lot of people just take them stuff to dump it. They still refer to them as tips rather than recycling centres, and it's costing an awful lot of money. And this perhaps is to me, highlights the focus of this partnership going forward. We should really be the Lincolnshire Waste Reduction Partnership. If we don't focus on actually preventing waste getting into the system in the first place, with everything else that's going to come down the road with regards to the Environment Bill and climate change, then all we're going to be talking about for the next few years again is how do we manage the costs of getting rid of rubbish. So hopefully we can start to actually turn that around and start to look at how do we actually get people to not create the rubbish in the first place, rather than how do we deal with it once it's presented to us, because we're just going to lose that battle if that's the way we carry on.
Absolutely right. I can see a few nodding heads there as well.
Sorry, Chairman. AD Selby would also like to speak.
Right, okay.
Thanks, Chair. It's just from a West Lindsey update perspective, really. Just to add to the HWRC debate, as we're talking about it probably seems relevant to once again raise the issue of cross-border household waste recycling centre usage, and that our residents and MPs who live around the border area of North Links and North East Links just cannot see the sense in why they need to do a 30 or 40 mile round trip when they can go across the border for a mile. And I get the cost thing and what have you, but from a West Lindsey perspective, we would welcome having another look at that, certainly. Just briefly, a couple of other points. Our new depot is on track and on budget and should be open, all being well, in November, so working hard around the logistical transfer of our staff to that. Paper and card paper will be heard by members later in the year as well, around introducing that in West Lindsey. And one relevant one is we carried out an operation. Thanks very much, LCC Highways, Ellie in particular, for helping us make it happen. We've managed to do a pilot, call it what you want, on the Lincoln bypass and parts of the A46 to litter pick on high speed roads, which I know is a real issue for lots of our residents, and So to get an operation in place with minimal traffic management was really appreciative of LCC Highways to help us make that happen, and we've had great feedback from residents, and we want to try and roll it out elsewhere in the district as well. We use signage and some comms on social media to get the message out what we're doing, because ultimately we want to stop people dropping litter on high-speed roads, and then it won't be an issue. I'm not saying we can get everywhere on high-speed roads. Some parts are clearly quite too dangerous for operations, but it's good to get on some bits. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you. Good to hear that it's been well received, really. Have we got any more speakers, Rachel, before I...
No more speakers.
So we'll go on to the governance review from Rachel, who was missed Wimbledon to be here today.
Yeah. Never mind, not to worry. Thank you, Chairman. So as part of our terms of reference, we do say that we'll review them regularly. They were reviewed last in March of 2020, and I took the view that actually the AGM is probably the right time where we would then do these on a biannual basis. So having looked at the terms of reference, the paper that's attached for you all today asks you to review what's in there, and in particular 2 points to consider. The first being point 10, the terms of reference, and to understand if we are happy to maintain an annual election of chair and vice chair, or whether you'd want to change that length of tenure to make it easier on the basis that we only have limited meetings each year. And the other point then in consideration is potentially to review point 13, where we meet formally 3 times a year. In light of the upcoming Environment Bill and all the work that we know that's going to bring us, a recommendation there may be that we change that to 4 annual meetings, returning back to 1 a quarter on that, which would then subsequently we could review the calendar in that basis. Other than that, if there are any other comments from the papers on any of the other terms that we need to update. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Councillor Brearley.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's a day of congratulations, and I would like to congratulate and welcome Mr. Reid to his role with the partnership, but also Rachel, congratulations on your new role. In terms of the review of the terms of reference, I think the electoral cycle will be different between the county council and the districts. I just raised that because I think the 1 year term makes sense from that point of view, but I would go with the majority view. If there was a preference for a 2 or a 4 year term, I'd be fine with that. Going on to the frequency of meetings, I do believe that there is there's special challenges that for rural areas, and I think in the light of the amount of consultation and the proposed changes that are coming forward, we know that those will hit us at some point, but we need very much abreast of that. And therefore, that it would be sensible to move to 4 formal meetings a year rather than 3. And the advantage of that is that they can be diarised, which makes it easier for busy members and officers alike. But also, can I say, in terms of the consideration of the appointment of a Lincolnshire Waste Partnership Programme Delivery Manager, for the same reasons that I've alluded to about some of the proposals that are coming forward, I do think that is a crucial role, and I would support the revision if necessary, but to go out to recruit to that position. I hope that's helpful, Chairman. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Gamble-Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Danny. I think we certainly, the fact that we're willing to use Teams makes it much easier to make a decision to go to more frequent meetings. I think the challenge always was the fact that people were travelling from the extremes of Lincolnshire to Lincoln, meant that we were reluctant to increase meetings unnecessarily. But now that we're willing to use video conferencing, particularly with what DEFRA's proposals that are in the pipeline, as mad as they are, if any of them come to fruition, we certainly do need to be willing to come together to have regular discussions if necessary, and even unscheduled ones or short notice ones. So I'd be more than willing to see us do it at least 4 times a year. With respect to the terms of office, I've never quite understood why the chairman has to be elected. I can't see the logic of anybody other than the portfolio holder for waste at the Lincolnshire level, at the county level, being the de facto chair of the partnership. They are the disposal authority at the end of the day, who bring it all together. I always thought that was the position that we accepted, and that the vice chairman was the one that changed if the partnership wished on an annual basis. But that's just me being pedantic, I suppose. Once the portfolio holders in place, they should be the chairman of the partnership, and then the vice chair should be the one who changes if the partnership wishes to do that. But it's up to the other members what they wish to see that change to, if at all. Number 14 there. But from the point of view of the rest of it, it looks fine from my perspective. So I think the meetings things is the main thing. But I would say it doesn't necessarily have to be in here, but I do hope that you will consider, Mr. Chairman, the political meetings. Please consider maintaining those going forward, the ones that we've had over the last 4 years, because I do think that's where we do come to a lot of agreement, a lot of consensus, and meetings of the mind that aren't necessarily what we're able to do at public meetings. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. Just I don't know if you mentioned it or not, but what about the programme manager? Was you in support of that?
Well, I'm steering clear of that because, as you probably know, currently I haven't got any, as people like to call it, skin in the game. So I would have to go back to the ranch and get some input on that. Again, I didn't know at all. No. All right, so it would need a better understanding. But again, I think the view may change with what DEFRA is threatening to do to us. So I think it may be a whole different outlook on what we may need to take as a view as a county about what may be about to fall upon us. So I'm going to take that under advisement, if you like, because we currently don't make a financial contribution. So I don't think I have a right to comment at this stage. So I may well come back to you. All right.
Thank you. Peter?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I'll start with the chair, vice chair. I mean, it's not exactly an arduous procedure. It didn't take us long, did it? So you know, to do it every year is, you know, probably, why change something that's not really broken on that one. So that's where I'll sit on that. In terms of the meetings, I mean, I'm happy to have 4 meetings a year. I think what I'd like to be is a real focus, though, if you're going to do that. And it not be a meeting where we turn up and we spend 90% of our time going over the same issues that everybody has all of the time, and that we actually focus on the real, the elephant in the room for a particular time. If we can do that, then it's worthwhile having 4 meetings. If it's not, then it might be worthwhile thinking about how we structure the officer working groups, as Roger's mentioned, the political informal groups, and how that interacts with the main meeting process. So happy to, as long as it's really productive on that score. And you're right, on so many levels, we've got huge challenges ahead. I don't even think DEFRA realise the challenges that they're proposing get delivered. I don't think they fully understand the impact that will have yet. And of course, we're the ones that are at the coalface and have to work together to deliver it. So that's where on that. On the program manager side of things, we were supportive. In the past, if we're going to be doing a lot of work, we need to make sure we've got the resource in place to deliver that, and to make sure that we're all coordinated in our delivery of it. You're pushing an open door on that one with me anyway, but I'll leave that one there anyway. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. I mean, I would say you're absolutely right. If you're just going to spend the time jibber-jabbering on throughout the meeting about stuff that you probably jibber-jabbered on the previous meeting, you're wasting your time. But I think if we get stuff on, everyone can get stuff on the agenda, the important stuff, the stuff that needs to deal with, and then we can go from there, can't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mervyn?
Switch the microphone on to the first thing. Thank you very much, Chairman. I'll take the job spec thing first. As Peter has just said, I think it's important to have somebody in place to act as a liaison between the districts. It's a very important role, and if you take that out, I think you're breaking the chain significantly. So I support that role. I think it's an important role to have as a coordinator. Whether the role expands more, I don't know. I mean, up until now, Rachel's done an extremely good job in sort of filling the breach with that. So it's something that I do support. I've got a couple of things, questions to ask. But first of all, I will say I do agree with going to 4 meetings. It's a very important time that we have now with the DEFRA consultation coming through, and the way that the government wants us to change things. So I support 4 meetings. Again, as just been said, as structured. In terms of the chairman role, I don't have a problem with the LCC portfolio holder being the de facto chairman with that, but I will go with the majority view in terms of whether we want to change that. And in the same as the role of vice chairman. If you have an effective chairman and an effective vice chairman, to me, it's a no-brainer to leave them in place for the period of which they're elected. So that's where I sit in terms of that. What I would like a little bit of clarification on, please. I think it's, so I've got this up on my other screen. It's paragraph 1, terms of reference, and it's subpara H. And it says, by way of a clear voting structure, make clear the majority view of the partnership so that all partners can determine their own authority's actions in that context. To me, the key wording here in all of this is partnership. We're the Lincolnshire Waste Partnership. Are we saying here then, as a partnership, that we're going to go with a majority view on items? Because when you sign up to a partnership, it's not necessarily your absolute view that's going to hold sway all of the time. You debate backwards and forwards, you take a vote. And for me, for a partnership to go forward, it has to be on the basis of the majority view. We may all have to do things at times that maybe necessarily we don't agree with, perhaps, I don't know. But is that what that subparagraph is saying? I'd just like some clarification on that, please.
I think that is the ethos of it, Councillor Head, is that we would work together on a majority view. But I do think, for example, where partners will want to also make their own representations, for example, in the recent DEFRA consultations, I think it's about saying that the partnership will take a majority view, but partners also, should there be specific instances, have the right to put forward their local authorities' view, potentially outside of the partnership. So, for example, with the DEFRA consultations. I also think that by way of a clear voting structure, it's actually saying we're going to make any definite decisions that it is taken on a vote. I think that was the intention when this was put in place.
Yeah, right, thank you, Rachel. Yeah, I don't have a problem with individual members having expressing a separate viewpoint outside of the partnership. I mean, you can't gag people in terms of that. But from a partnership point of view, that was all I was angling at. If, as a partnership, we're all sitting around the table now and we discuss things backwards and forwards, and we come to a consensus, is that consensus then going to be something that we all take forward? Although maybe one or two may not be wholly in agreement with that particular point of view.
Answer that one.
Let's put you on the spot. Sorry.
Is that myself, or is that putting the chair on the spot?
No, that was you, Rachel.
Well, I guess that's a decision for the partnership, really, isn't it? In terms of, do you want where there are issues where there is a requirement as a partnership to take certain actions? Do you want to be able to vote on them and all agree to follow that?
I suppose in some respects it's probably a difficult one, because you've got some things like the paper and card trial. Well, if you're not going to do it, you're just not going to do it, no matter what everyone says, although we would like everyone to do it. And then you've got consultation responses, where some members might disagree with certain things, but actually the majority do. And at the minute, we can't respond as a group without a majority. So we have to include all the different responses from the different people. It is a bit complicated at times, I think.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm sorry for putting it out there, but I just wanted a bit of a steer on that, and I'm sorry if I've stirred up a hornet's nest.
And maybe it is contextual to the subject that you're actually discussing at that time.
So do you want to
if I can interject there, probably as being one of the longest serving elected members on the partnership, I can understand why it's in there. It's a useful instrument should and it might even be a requirement from when the government first produced the requirement for a waste partnership. But I can't personally recall any occasion when we have been required to take a binding vote that has tied us all into a requirement to do anything going forward. Not in my time, because we all are politically independent, and therefore we all do what we feel best for our residents. The partnership ultimately has no executive power. It's a strategic partnership from the point of view of trying to get consensus on a position. And as you've alluded to already, it would have been great if everybody had participated in paper and card and in a uniform manner, but that was not possible. And we tried our best to implement it to see how it worked, and I think that's probably the only way you can make a partnership work. So there's no harm in having it retained there, especially with what's coming down the line with DEFRA. It may suit us at some point to have it there, but whether it'll ever be implemented by us is another matter. And then you've got LGR coming along as well. So, you know, it may become redundant at some stage. So I think it's a moot point in many ways, to be honest, and not necessarily something that we need to tax our minds with too much.
Thank you, Roger. Peter, come back.
Yeah, I did. On that one, I think I wanted to sort of say that what the partnership in terms of that clause does is it tells me what I can do to help bring my members along when I go back to them. So if our partnership has a consensus view and we know what our fellow districts, because we all work together, you know, even behind the scenes, the officers are always talking to each other. This is a group effort. And what the decisions do is they tell me, okay, well, you know, there's a move towards this. There's some support for this. Other districts are supportive of whatever it is we're talking about, and that helps me when I go back to my members and say, right, you know, we're all in this, and this is what this is what the general feeling across the piece is, and it helps me to convince them. Because if I've supported it, I obviously think it's a good idea, and it helps me then, you know, impress upon them that actually this is not just me sitting here on my own. This is me sitting here as your representative on a much bigger partnership, and this is why we should do it. So it's a good thing to have. I mean, I don't think I would ever want to be forced to do something that the partnership said, because there are so many diverse different districts around. I mean, we just had we just had it when we were talking about household waste and the different areas and all that. You know, just in the last item, you know, there are so many you know, there's so many intricacies of the way that this whole thing works that it's, you know, you can't force somebody, you know, in Louth to do what somebody in Stamford wants. You know, it's because they're different areas and there are different constraints. So the strength of the partnership gives me, you know, that impetus to go back and help me bring people along, because at the end of the day, I think, you know, it's my view that we all need to bring our members and our residents along with us, and if you do that, you get so much better support for what you're doing, and you get so much better participation, and ultimately you're much more successful.
Richard, did you want to come in?
Did you say me?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't have my hand up, but
I thought I'd just let you in.
You thought he just nobbled me. Well, I can understand why Merv's asking the question, and I can understand what some people are saying, and I suppose it'll get us to a point in the future where if we've got to implement different collection policies, as has been talking about, you know, with DEFRA and the Environment Bill, there'll come a point where there will be probably some very tough decisions to make with regards to, I mean, as you say, the county is the disposal authority. It's going to have to take at some stage probably a firm line when we start to dispose of food waste and such forth on how that's disposed of. And so it'll almost be, I won't say that decisions will be enforced, but there'll probably have to be greater clarity over how decisions are made across all the authorities, because there will have to be there's got to be a singularity of purpose in all this. We've got to be able to decide at some stage that do we move together entirely as a county to do things, and is there actually room at that point in anybody doing things different? And so we're not at that point yet. We're still waiting on the consultations and the bills coming out and all the furore that's going to go with that, and where we need to be. But I think if I'm understanding what Merv's saying, then basically is he saying, is there an opt-out and should that be there? And I understand other people saying this is not a decision-making body as we sit here today, but as waste, as I said earlier, as waste becomes more and more expensive and more of an issue that's across different streams of government policy, then we may have to look at how we run the partnership. I think we can't just throw that away. So the question's probably early today, but it's a question that's going to come up again once we realise what we're all going to be dealing with in the next couple of years.
Richard. Rachel, did you want to finish anything else? I think that's the speakers actually.
So I guess from the conversations, in terms of where we are, my understanding is that we'll leave the terms of reference as is, other than to alter the frequency of meetings to 4 a year, if that's consensus. I also take on board what members have said about it being a more focused agenda. And perhaps I might suggest from that maybe that we were to request ahead of the papers being issued a small update from each authority in the partner updates, and that we then issue a more focused agenda around specific items in the forward view going forward. Would that make sense?
Would for me. Yeah. I can't see anyone else.
Yep.
Okay, and then in terms of the LWP programme manager role, again, I hear support looking at what's going forward. Can I suggest then perhaps that we take that one to the strategic officer group to look at the alternatives and to review what that job description looks like, and bring that then back to the next meeting of this with a proposal as to how we support with the right resources the partnership going forward? Would that be acceptable? So we take it, we review the requirements of the role to understand whether that job description should change in any way, and if so, make those amendments and put that back before the next meeting of the LWP with a review as to what we want to do to fill that post. I'm still undertaking some of those duties anyway, majority of them at this point in time, so there is still support to the partnership.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. I don't know about
Yep. Okay, that's what we'll do on that item then. Thank you.
Does everyone just want to put their cameras on and just put their hands up just to, I can't see anyone. Yeah, that's fine. That'll do.
Excellent, thank you.
So that's that sorted. So item 8, performance measure update, and Matthew Mitchell. Morning.
Thank you, Danny. I'm hoping you can see me, and congratulations on your new role as chair. I notice as well that rather embarrassingly, I've got the same background as Rachel has, but it's one of our LCC corporate backgrounds. Bearing in mind what Councillor Mosley said, I'm glad to say that my intention on both the papers I'll be doing today is to try to focus on the elephant or elephants in the room, rather than go through absolutely everything in detail. The detail is very much all there in the papers. If anybody would like to look through all the detail of all of the information about performance updates. The main headline, I would say, at this point is clearly the elephant in the room, COVID this year. Apologies if my eyes are darting around. I'm looking at my notes just to check that I'm saying all the right things. COVID has had a huge impact on our performance during 2020-21. Compared to the previous year, some of the main examples, curbside, we've seen about 7% more tonnage collected at curbside during the year than we did in the preceding year. But at the same time, we've seen a reduction at household waste recycling centres of about 66% across the year as a whole. A lot of that was in the early days when the sites were closed briefly during the first lockdown, but the tonnage has actually remained lower, and we're still running at about half of the tonnage throughput that we were seeing prior to the whole COVID situation. As Mike has said, we have things under review at the moment in terms of the current restrictions on access to sites. So that may change, but I would say at this point it's unclear whether we are in some kind of new normal or whether things will indeed return to those previous levels. that's the main thing going on at the moment. That is the elephant in the room. In terms of some details, looking at the charts, I think I'll see if I can manage to show these on the screen. And apologies if this goes massively wrong. So can somebody confirm to me, Chair, can you tell me, can you see that chart that I'm showing?
All clear.
Sorry?
All clear.
Good. So where we're at with the chart is looking at the first one. That is a summary of our current performance, the performance for the year as a whole. There's good news and there's bad news. The good news is looking at the quantity of waste, which is these pink lines. The purple lines are our target of keeping waste down to 1,000 kilograms per household per year. We've been significantly below that. This is all provisional data, I must state at this point, for the year of 2020-21. We were significantly below that, largely due to those reductions in throughput at the household waste sites. As I've already said, curbside was up slightly, but overall the quantity of waste we've handled as a waste partnership was down, which, however you weight it, is good news. That does include everything we've dealt with across the board, as well as household waste sites and curbside. That includes fly tipping, litter, all the various other waste streams. So that's the good news. The bad news is that in seeing reduced throughputs through household waste sites, where the recycling rate is generally very high, around about 75% recycling, through the loss of some of that recyclable material, the overall recycling rate of the partnership has been significantly lower than our target, which was to recycle 46%. We've recycled around 42%. It's looking now, looking at the final figures which I'm putting together, we might be slightly higher, but not significantly higher than 42%. That is the bad news. The hope is that that impact is largely down to the impact of COVID during this year, and that we will be able to start picking that back up. But as I've already said, we really don't know whether we're in some kind of new normal and whether behaviour will continue as it has, which, as I say, is good news in terms of the quantity of waste, but bad news in terms of the recycling rate. I'm not intending, actually, I could go through the details of the charts, but very briefly, this chart on the right, chart 2, shows we've received more in curbside recycling, which is good. Chart 3 shows we've actually had less green waste this year, although that does include a reduction at household waste sites. But overall, there has been less green waste, and that has hit our recycling rate as well. The hope is that some of that, as you can see, things fluctuate year by year due to the weather and growing conditions, but this is the lowest year we've had in a number of years in terms of the green waste we've composted. And that does seem to also be potentially an impact of COVID. Looking at the chart 4, you can just generally see the overall fact that we've had less waste in most of the streams, but we have had more at curbside than in previous years. But again, less waste is a good thing, at least in theory. So that's those charts. And I will just show you as well another chart. This is a new way of measuring that we've put in terms of contamination, because we've said in the past we wanted to measure the levels of contamination of our curbside recycling collections. You can see the blue line is percentage, and that is reasonably steady. We've seen a reasonably steady percentage of contamination. The bad news is, because we've had more waste in terms of quantity in curbside collections, including recycling collections, that has amounted to more contamination in terms of kilograms per household in those collections. It's hoped that we'll be able to reduce that. The work is ongoing in terms of the twin stream collections, and that does seem to be having an initial impact on the level of contamination. So hopefully we will see that go down in future years, and hopefully that rise in kilograms per household of contamination is another one of these COVID effects that we will be out the other side of. So I stop sharing that. And that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour. And I'm then open to any questions. So, Chair, I'll hand back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. I think Peter was sent a message through the chat box for a question earlier.
Yeah, thanks very much, Dan. It was about the overall performance and that drop that you saw in the waste in last year. And I wonder how. I mean, you said you included all of the other waste streams. I'm going to go back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, which was the bulky collections. Where we've all seen a big increase in bulkies, and I do know that, for example, with fridges and freezers, they might be taken by our bulkies straight to the disposal agent, which is literally just up the road in Grantham. And I'm wondering whether or not we're missing counting some of that. In the way that we deal with it, because I'm guessing that in order for it to be counted, does it have to go through the transfer station and be assessed in that way? And then the other thing was, I'm not surprised that you're seeing contamination in curbside. I mean, it's disappointing, but it is, I think people are trying to sort of sneak things in under the wire, aren't they? Rather than go and book a slot at a waste recycling centre. I mean, obviously, if the reduction is real, and I don't believe it is, I think I'm on the same page as you there, Matthew. I think that we'll see some bounce back. I think in the next few months. I don't think we'll end up exactly where we were because we've implemented some new measures and they're broadly positive. But I think there's still a lot of people hoarding a lot of stuff. That they're then going to, when it becomes easier and more convenient, they're then going to go and hit the disposal routes with. And of course, that doesn't support us in our reduction strategy, but that's the way it is. But I'd like to know about the bulkies and that counting.
As far as I'm aware, that does include everything. It includes everything we're told about. It's certainly not just the transfer stations. But I would say if I'm happy to have a conversation with officers in terms of whether there are any specific streams that might be missing the figures. I would say, however, that in terms of the size, we're missing, well, I say missing, that's the only word I can use at the moment, thousands and thousands of tonnes that we would have expected to see going through household waste recycling centres, and any uplift in other streams, for instance, fly tipping, might be hundreds of tonnes, but certainly isn't thousands and thousands. And I think it is a mystery where this missing waste has gone, whether it's building up in people's garages or whether people are thinking, oh, I won't replace my sofa this year because it's harder to go and sit in the shop and choose one, or what. But yes, I'd be keen to explore with other officers if there are any streams that we're missing, so that we can try to make sure we are recording everything. But as far as I'm aware, yes, that is everything.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I wasn't sure what the scale was. It was just something that cropped up, because if we've all doubled, that could, that obviously that's something. But I think you're right. I think it's sat in people's garages and exactly what you said.
Thank you, Roger. I think it was Roger next.
Yeah, I mean, the most obvious thing is the fact that many people are in fact out of work. I mean, in one shape or form, whether they were furloughed or whether they were just straightforwardly not working, millions of people were out of work. So clearly they weren't generating waste at the same level. Yes, they were consuming, but they were consuming the essentials, but they weren't consuming what you might consider to be luxury goods, because they didn't have the same level of disposable income. So I don't think it's that level of a mystery as we might first think. Or even though the bulkies indeed were up, and some of that, certainly in our area, is my belief. Some of that was covert, for want of a better description, landlords finding ways to give us their cast-offs from emptying properties that were originally in the rental market or whatever as migrants went home. Certainly in our area is the suspicion. Because we had to go from 1 day a week to 2 days a week, and then at one stage we were supplementing that with a 3-day week on bulky collections, and we were still in some cases 3 and 4 weeks behind to try and catch up. So yes, we were also snowed under with bulky collections. To some extent, I think the waste avalanche is a curious one. And I was trying to square the circle of home deliveries and the amount of cardboard that must have generated, the Amazon in particular, and everything regarding packaging, and I wondered how that was filtering through the system. But of course, people still buy stuff that is in boxes and packaging, so I wondered how that had generated an increase for us, if at all, whether we'd seen any of that, an increase there in paper and card, because that was a curiosity to me, whether that was showing through in our figures to any great extent. And we shouldn't be concerned at this stage, should we, about, because it answers some of what Richard said about waste reduction. We want to see waste reduced, so we should see a diminishing of use of our household waste and recycling centres if that's one of our goals. I know it's a strange one to see because it's not using the resource to its full capacity, but how we continue to achieve that and still deliver a service economically is a conundrum, of course, particularly when we're talking about keeping them open for more days. So it is a challenge, and one that is probably what the partnership is set up for, to answer those challenges and square that circle in many ways and use that, turn that around to a positive message to the public. Tell them that they have reduced their waste generation and use COVID as a positive rather than a negative in some way or another. How you spin that one, Matthew? Well done. Bring that back next time, please. There's your homework. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, those are good points, Councillor Gamble-Jones, and I think, yes, we do need to look in more detail about what is happening with individual streams. For instance, yes, we're receiving more in recyclables at curbside, but exactly what is in there, what has changed? Are some things the same and some things more? What's in the contamination? And those are the sorts of things that we will be able to look at through our new sampling station and actually start to assess those things. I mean, for instance, I don't know whether part of the issue is that items which people would have taken to the recycling centre, like electricals, if they're putting them in their recycling bin at home thinking that they can be recycled through that, then they just become contamination. And not only that, potentially dangerous contamination in terms of batteries being damaged and that sort of thing. But yes, it's all work that we will be undertaking as time goes forward and as we try to examine what is happening now. The latest figures I do have, incidentally, are that curbside does still seem to be up, although up by less than it was previously, and household waste sites do still seem to be running at about half of the throughput that they were previously. But that's as of April, which is the last full figures that I have.
Thank you, Matthew. I mean, I mean, some of the stuff might have actually gone for trade waste that's not gone through the household sites, and also people might have hired skips, and we don't have the data from them commercial operators to compare between the two. So that's that. Did you want to come in, Mike, or did I carry on with the others?
You just took the thank you, Chairman. You just took the words out of my mouth, because we do obviously liaise and deal with private waste contractors, and anecdotally they're reporting significant business increase in the last 12 months, which may be down to trade users who were previously possibly abusing the household waste recycling centres, and it could be a shift, but we don't have, as Danny just said, we don't have the data to support that. So it is purely anecdotal at this point. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Next on the list is Bob.
Thank you. Thanks, Matthew, for your report. I will say here in Lincoln, I do welcome any relaxation on the household waste recycling centre. And I'm pleased to see that there's been some relaxation on the use of small trailers as well. My experience is that people use it sensibly and are keen to recycle, and I think we may see some increases in recycling taking place. Perhaps we shouldn't be calling it click and tip if we don't want the old theory of people just going and tipping stuff. But as I say, for most people are very selective in what they take. Just on the data, though, do we have any localised data, district-based recycling data? I think that used to be available, and is it likely to be available in the future? Thank you.
In terms of the data from the MRF, I don't think my colleague Anna is with us today, but I believe she's working on making sure that does come out on a regular basis. In terms of further analysis at a district level, yes, that's the next step that I shall be moving on to now that we've got pretty much complete figures for the year, to be able to look at how the figures are across each district, so that you can see what the comparison is in your own areas.
Thank you. Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Next one, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick question. It probably dovetails quite nicely with Councillor Bushell's, which was about have we got enough data yet, Matthew, about the paper and card collections? Do we know what impact that is having in the areas where it's been introduced so far, please?
I believe Rachel will be covering that in an item that's coming up.
Yeah, I'll be giving some information and update on that, Steve, shortly. But yes, we have data coming through in terms of quantity, quality, and impact on the MDR, in particular for Boston. And I'll cover that in the next item, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. So I can't see anyone else. So are we all happy with that?
Yeah, thank you.
I'll take that all as a yes. So that takes, thank you, Matthew, for that one. That takes on to number 9, which is the Joint Municipal Waste Management Strategy Action Plan update. Rachel.
Thank you. So the paper before you is an update to the key projects and actions that are going on. I don't intend to go through each of them, but pick out some of the more pertinent ones. And certainly there's a little bit more comprehensive report and feedback there on the twin stream implementation. So just as a point to recognise is that in terms of fly tipping, that still remains very high on our action plan, and we're working actively as part of the Environmental Crime Partnership. And I'd suggest that goes on to our forward view to bring a regular and a more thorough update on that one. Action A8 is around the implementation. As I say, I'll talk about that in a second. I'd just like to recognise at the meeting the work that the communications group have done over the last year and continue to do. I think that's one of the things certainly that I've seen in my role, is that the communications leads across the county are all working really consistently now, and that's very much welcomed from where we started a little while ago. Mike's given us an update in terms of the household waste recycling centres, and we continue to look at all of the infrastructure facilities required, and as he said, we will be focusing a view around the requirements for future disposal, in particular around AD going forward. The plan also covers in there Matthew's report around key performance indicators and the suite that he maintains for us. And as an update, we are working, and we'll soon have a draft to circulate to you all for comment of this year's annual report. So following this meeting, I would suggest by the end of July, you will have had that draft for your comment in terms of the work of the partnership over the last 12 months. In particular, then, the twin stream implementation and what that looks like. Obviously, it was agreed some 2 years ago now that we would commence a trial, which we did back in September, crikey, of 2019. And then in March, we agreed that we would, sorry, earlier than March, but the implementation in the first district commenced in March, which was in Boston. So this has been very much focused on what we're trying to steer away from is the purple bin or the purple lidded bin, and getting residents to see that this is around an improvement in their recycling habits and their recycling streams, and quite rightly also focusing some of our communications in that in terms of waste minimisation. So do you need to get rid, you need to buy and get rid of something, and if you do, the line that we're using is right thing, right bin, which has been tested through our residents recycling panel, and they've helped us come up with all the right communications, the right terminology to put out all our material in, and certainly it's gone down really well with members of the public. So as I said, Boston Borough Council started this back in March with the delivery of their bins and their new collection regime commencing in April. In terms of the engagement, we wrote directly to every household within the borough. We did an extensive communications campaign. We have the engagement staff in the performance and improvement team who are constantly talking with residents, helping them, educating them. We've started to work with a small number of schools, and we're going to build that programme of schools as that team is nearly now, or should within the next 2 months, be at full capacity. So we've got a good education campaign for schools and other community groups. Also liaising with the Lincolnshire Association of Local Councils, so through parishes, and we'll be giving those all the relevant engagement and communications as well. So very much a strategy around this rather than just sending a letter and giving a bin. What we've seen, and I think this probably should, Steve, answer some of your questions, and certainly I'm happy to talk more in detail about the data we're capturing on a daily basis. The paper and card itself is being separated to a very high quality at curbside. We've had a participation rate of around 99% of households in the last collection presenting their bins. The quality of the paper and card is exceedingly high. Palm Paper are our contracted off-taker and are reporting consistently a 98.5% quality of the materials that we are sending to them, and are extremely pleased with the material that is excuse me, going across to them. You'll see from the table on page 29, I think, in the papers, that, as I say, the participation rate is over 99%, and the tonnage over the first 3 collections has continued to increase to quite a significant increase on this 3rd collection now that all members or all residents are participating to the best of their ability. And I think Councillor Gamber-Jones, you said about understanding the impact of the materials, and certainly we are seeing a very high proportion of cardboard and packaging in those materials. We're able to sample them on the day that they are taken to the transfer station and sort them into the different fractions within each waste stream. That sampling station is proving invaluable. The results at the end of the day get fed back in to the collection authority, and we liaise those directly with our communications in real time, which has been really helpful. I think the paper and card is probably the simple element to this. The concentration has been around improving the quality of the mixed dry recycling. We're on to the third collection. We're within that collection this week, hence the reason there are no figures in this paper. But what we saw was in the first collections, you'll see that our contamination was around about 35% within the rest of the mixed dry recycling. We'd done a baseline prior to that was probably around about 32-33% consistently on average contamination. The last 4 weeks, so yes, we rejected a number of bins at curbside. However, the quality of the material that was collected reduced our contamination down there to 20%. So with some 80% of all the material that was collected being of extremely high quality. We have tagged bins and advised residents what should and shouldn't be in and why we've left them. And where possible, we've tried to visit and have conversations over the telephone, by email and in person with as many people as possible about why their bins were not collected. So, and in terms of being able to report this week, just bear with me while I just flick to the live data I have. So far this week, our rejections on the third collection in Boston have halved over the first 3 days of the week, and our tonnage is looking slightly up on last month, but our quality again at the moment is sitting at an average of 22% quality. So when we look at that from the 35% that we had prior to engagement, it's a phenomenal success. So we will be moving on to implementing this in the second waste collection authority in the autumn. So subject to council approval from North Kesteven, the plan will be that the residents there will receive their householder packs towards the end of this month, potentially, if that's approved, and their collections under the new way of working will commence in September. Yeah, I'm happy to take any questions on any of the points on the action plan, or on, in particular, on the twin stream implementation.
Thank you, Rachel. Steve?
Thank you. Rachel, the one figure that I'm after, really, which doesn't appear to be on there, and forgive me if my maths aren't doing it fast enough, is the actual effect on Boston in terms of the outcome, in terms of the effect on the composting and recycling rate, their overall rate.
Yeah, it isn't there, Steve, as yet. That's the work that Matthew was just mentioning that we now need to go on to in a bit more detail, and I'm conscious that you have sent an email asking for that. We haven't had, this is the third month of the third cycle, so we needed to get a little bit of stability in there. But Matthew and I are both very aware that you are looking for that information, and we will work through to that for you.
Thank you. I suppose the only other one is the observation about the contamination level. Going down from 35 to 20 is obviously a huge improvement, massive improvement. 20 though is still significantly up on what others are reporting nationally. So maybe as a partnership, we've got to do a bit more work on that to find out exactly what's in that stream. It's just an observation.
Yeah, I think, and to answer that, Steve, we know that the highest contaminant is soft plastic, so plastic bags, films, and food wrappers. That is by far, on a daily basis, the highest contaminant.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mervyn.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I would just like to applaud Rachel and the team for the work that they've done in getting all this up and running. The key, obviously, is education. Being involved at the trial stage and at various community centres when residents were invited to come in and talk about it. The majority of people and you'll never get everybody 100% this way, but the majority of people do want to do the right thing. And lots of people that came in, and I suspect if you take a straw poll round, people don't understand. And I think the contamination that Rachel's just mentioned in terms of plastic films, there's a lot of confusion out there where you will get materials that come into your home either from the supermarket or through the door that say can be recycled but may not be recycled by your district, and that's the confusion I think that a lot of people have. The communication and education program that's been put in place with schools and the Lincolnshire Association of Councils, what have you, really good moves. What I would say, it's incumbent on every single elected member in this conversation today and every single elected member across the county to also take on the responsibility of educating their residents, to engage with their parish councils, local groups and what have you, to spread the message. We all need to be up to speed on this, on what is and can be done. In terms of the twin stream approach that we've kicked off, again, we're ahead of the curve. I don't know if anybody heard, I think it was about a week and a half ago now, the chief exec of DS Smith Packaging saying that there was an acute shortage of card material for recycling, and them being the prime supplier for Amazon were urging people to recycle all their card and paper to get this thing going forwards. So I think what we're doing here is really good, and I would expect that as we go through rolling this out across the county, that we will see our recycling rates improve and contamination levels go down significantly, because people generally do want to do the right thing. It's just telling them what the right thing to do is. So thank you very much to Rachel, Matthew and the team. Thank you.
So before we go on, can I just pick up one point that you said there, Councillor Head, about all of the authorities? So as I explained, we are issuing all our communications under one branding now of the right thing, right bin. And whilst there's a programme for rolling in all the collection authorities into this, what the communications group are doing is currently bringing together a set of consistent communications for each of the districts. So if you're still operating with paper and card in the rest of your recycling bin, you will have the same leaflets, branding and information for your residents at this point that looks the same across the county, and I'm expecting those imminently that will then be shared with each of the collection authorities for engagement and communications to happen now, because that gives us a foundation if we can start to improve quality already across the rest of the districts.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Mervyn. Peter, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Rachel, for that. Really interesting, and of course, we're keeping a close eye on this because it's something that we're going to have to start throwing down our governance route in the not too dim and distant future. One question I've got is about the total tonnages. I noticed that we're looking at the tonnage in your paper card and the tonnage in your mixed dye recycling. I wonder, do we have a comparison about what we would have expected that to be if we hadn't had the separation? So I'm trying to understand, by introducing that twin stream, are we encouraging more waste to come to us inadvertently? Are we encouraging people to just to recycle better and perhaps not burn stuff in their incinerators or do what it is they do with it? I would like to try and understand a little bit about that and whether we've got the numbers on that.
So we haven't to hand yet, Councillor Mosley, is the honest answer, but that is the step that, in terms of taking this now to understand the overall recycling rates, the impact on where we started in all of the waste streams, because the thing that we also need to be able to do is compare the impact it's had on our residual waste streams as well, to understand if we've taken paper and card out of there. And from a visual sample, and it is a visual sample across Boston, I would suggest that we have removed paper and card so far out of that waste stream, but it's some work that we need to do now to understand where we started in terms of tonnage and composition, where we are now, and the impact of what it's done across those waste streams. So that is the next phase of data reconciliation that we need to look at.
Yeah, that's good. Just a quick follow up on that, because on something that Mervyn said about, I mean, I did see the same press article about the shortage of paper card. I mean, it's a confluence of us all buying online, and by doing that, we're not supporting. Do we really need to buy all of those things online? And of course, Amazon are just a business, and they're providing what people want to purchase in some respect. But that's having the impact in that, what you get from Amazon is normally very tiny and comes in a massive box with a whole heap of paper inside it. And I still think there's work for the partnership to do to lobby business to be a lot more sensible about the way that it packages its products, especially now, so that we can be that organisation that says, no, this is about reducing more than anything. And what Richard was saying earlier. So I think there is an opportunity there again, to work together towards that goal.
Absolutely agree.
Thank you, Peter. Richard, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Danny, and thank you, Rachel. Comprehensive, and I'll say from an NK point of view, I'm so pleased it's going to our authority next week to hopefully be agreed. I can't see why anybody would disagree with the twin stream approach. And we've got some meaty stuff there really on that action plan, and there's themes that cut across all the way. But one that's not there, then I don't obviously know what percentage of waste it is, but then again, it's not the percentage that matters so much to me. But I think a big something that's really risen to the fore this year, whilst everybody's now staying on their extortionate staycations, is that it's not just a coastal thing, but tourism is a big part of the economy for Lincolnshire. We want to welcome people in, but the number of street bins is on the rise. I had a presentation at NK, which was for all members, and we was talking then about the numbers of bins, and it's we're talking about carbon footprint for vehicles and such forth, but I'd really like to see some kind of comms plan around take it out, take it back. Why is it that we have to provide, as soon as we have somewhere that people want to go, the first thing you have to do is put a bin in there so they can just throw everything away? As somebody that used to walk, well, I still do, but I used to walk, hike properly. It was just lighter on the way back. It wasn't that you dumped it somewhere. It stayed in your bag and you took it back with you, and you then recycled it, because of course most of the street bins that are out there are all just general waste bins. So there's probably an awful lot of recyclate that's going into them that could be kept out. So I think we ought to look at that as well. Is part of this what I'm saying about waste reduction? Why is it all we ever do is provide for people to produce rubbish instead of saying you shouldn't be producing it in the first place? If you're quite happy to go out with a picnic for the day, take the wrappers back with you. Don't expect the council to put a bin there that you then complain about if they can't empty it in a day, because so many thousand people have descended on the same beach or hotspot, and then it's the council, as per usual, hasn't done its job properly, when the fact is they shouldn't have been putting the rubbish there in the first place, in my opinion. So I don't know whether that's being looked at or whether there's an appetite to actually go with that.
So it's certainly not a specific action on the communications and engagement calendar, but I have taken note of that.
Thanks.
Quite a good point, to be honest. Roger, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I'd, just a very political point there on bins. And again, I don't know how many other members will have experienced this. And I do need to be careful, because I am very likely to be hung, drawn and quartered when I mention anything to do with volunteer litter groups. There is a practice in South Holland, and in particular Spalding, for the groups to install their own bins, and this is one of the problems that we've encountered. So just a point that Richard may need to know. I don't know how prevalent community litter picking groups are in his area, but these bins have appeared in a number of areas without council involvement, and they are a significant issue. Currently, they are being emptied by these groups and their bags deposited adjacent to existing litter bins, and that's just a point of note for you. So it can be an issue, and that may be some of the issues that you are dealing with, where new bins are appearing that are out of the council's control. Just something for you to be aware of.
I am aware of what you're talking about, Councillor Tobermory, and I think that's a separate issue in itself where action needs to be taken. But it's in general. I just think it's a trend that we've got into, that everywhere you've got something going on, you need to put a rubbish bin in instead of saying to people don't produce the rubbish. But I know fully what you're talking about, and I think that it's spreading beyond the area you're talking about.
Yeah, thank you for that. See no one else. Is sort of everyone happy to support them recommendations? Don't speak at once.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Good.
Agreed.
So that brings on to the biggie, number 10. DEFRA consultations and their potential impacts on the LWP partners. Matthew, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm glad to be introduced as the biggie. I hope that was a reference to the report and not to me. I shall be trying, again in line with the elephant in the room principle, not to go through every detail. The elephant in the room in this case being food waste, I would say. But I do want to just very briefly talk about the various DEFRA consultations that have been going on and their impacts. First of all, my thanks to all those of you who've been involved in helping us put together partnership responses to the DEFRA consultations that have been going on recently. It was very interesting to work with a number of people with different points of view and to come to a partnership response which not only set out a kind of a general we agree or disagree with this policy proposal, but also allowed us to put considerable commentary in, which I'm trusting DEFRA will read in analysing those responses and in considering the future direction of those policies. So many thanks both to those who are present at the meeting today and to those who have not been able to attend today, but who certainly contributed to those responses. Just as a brief summary for those who are not aware, in terms of the various DEFRA proposals at the moment, DEFRA have been consulting both this year and last year on a number of proposals, including, I say last year, sorry, in 2019, the first consultations happened, I believe. They've been proposing some consistency in terms of the collection schemes nationally. That includes, it's a very long document. All of these have been very long documents with lots of proposals. I'd highly commend them to you to read if you want to know more details. But anyway, consistency of collections, the main headlines from that have been the proposal to introduce mandatory food waste collections nationally, both for households and for businesses. Various proposals on consistency in terms of dry recycling collections, and also the proposal that all households should get a free, as they describe it, garden waste collection. I'll go on to more of the impact of those on us shortly, but there are various proposals in that, and a lot of the response in terms of our consultation responses on that one have been that consistency is good in a lot of ways, but that there needs to be some acknowledgement that local needs, local situations require local solutions sometimes. Other things DEFRA have been consulting on have included enhanced producer responsibility, which is fortunately been shortened to EPR, EPR for packaging waste, and that's the proposal that packaging manufacturers would pay into a fund, which would then help to fund local authorities in managing that packaging when it gets to the end of the line. That's a biggie and should involve money coming through to councils, but it's also likely to include some requirements on us in terms of the services that we provide. And a lot of that is unclear at the moment in terms of the detail. All of these consultations, DEFRA have said they're intending to respond, I believe, by the end of this year. There's a lot for them to take in, and we await that detail before we really know exactly what's going on with that. Another proposal that is another one that can be shortened into 3 letters is deposit return schemes, DRS, and the proposal of that is that consumers would be charged a deposit when they buy a drink, a deposit on the container that they're purchasing the drink in, that they would then be able to return to the retailer afterwards and get their deposit back. The deposit amount is likely to be 20 pence per item, although that's open to discussion still. The big impact on local authorities is that that is going to divert some material which we currently recycle through our curbside collections and house of waste sites. But how much will depend on the design of the scheme, and details, again, are in discussion and yet to be decided, partly through consultations which have been happening this year. There are other proposals, numerous other proposals, such as a tax on non-recycled plastic packaging, and proposals on waste prevention, a waste prevention plan for England. Those do have less direct impact on the LWP, although, as has already been discussed, waste reduction is a good thing. We do want to participate in that, and we will be doing things relating to that. But I intend to focus on the impacts of the other items. So the key impacts on us are, number one, food waste. It does now seem almost certain, although it's still not into legislation, that it will be a requirement that all households receive their food waste collection, and probably it will be specified that that will be weekly. And currently it's proposed that that will be separate to all other streams, including other compostable streams like garden waste. It's a biggie, it's complicated, it's something we need to work on. It's urgent as well as vitally important that we start moving on that. I know some partners, both in terms of collection and disposal, are already starting to look at that, but I can't stress how important that is, that work progresses on that and that we work together as a partnership to ensure we have a joined up solution from collection through to recycling, through to use of the products from anaerobic digestion at the end of the stream. In terms of dry recycling, there will be lots of impacts on us. There are things we need to be aware of in terms of all of those proposals. But the impacts, to be honest, will depend on what comes out of the DEFRA consultations. It does look like our twin stream collections are a move in the right direction, and a move which DEFRA would be supportive of. But it's not clear as yet how strong the requirement will be for separate collections of more materials than that. At the moment, the hope is the twin stream will be sufficient and that we won't be required to move any further than that. But it's potentially in the pipeline that there might be stronger proposals. But we shall have to wait and see what comes out of the consultations. Very much in our consultation response, we were saying that our move to twin stream should be acknowledged as being a move in the right direction and sufficient for improving the quality and quantity of material that we're recycling. And hopefully our statistics will help to prove that. Another proposal, as I've already mentioned, is for free garden waste collections, free as in the resident isn't charged for their individual collections. We did have some debate over that in our consultation response, but in the end we disagreed with that as a proposal, the thinking being that whilst free can be seen as free by residents in terms of they're not being charged for their individual collections, actually the collections would eventually be funded via either local taxation or national taxation. and that requirement would then mean that all residents, even those living in a flat with no garden, would be contributing through their taxes to those collections. And in terms of the people producing the waste being responsible for their waste, it's probably better if charging can happen. And as I say, it will have to be funded somehow. But that is another possibility that might be coming, and that would clearly be a big impact both on our collection services and on the quantity of material we'd be having to send to composters. Another impact that is in the paper is waste prevention. I think it is clear that we do need to do more on waste prevention. There are some specific proposals in their early stages at the County Council in terms of looking at, for instance, more reuse of materials at household waste sites, which is not prevention in itself, but it's moving waste further up the waste hierarchy and does tie in with the waste prevention plan for England and some of DEFRA's proposals. But I certainly would be keen for us as a partnership to look at more ways that we can engage with the public in terms of waste prevention and minimisation, as well as reuse of materials where that's possible and appropriate. So those are the main items, and I would commend to you that the partnership is aware of those priorities, aware of those things coming down the road, aware of the need to work on them, and particularly on food waste.
Thank you. Do we have anyone who wants to speak? Peter?
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. You knew I was going to speak on this, didn't you? It was inevitable. You're right. There are a few things there, isn't there? I mean, food waste is the big one, and the big key there is in very much the same way that we talked about the twin streams and paper card. The key is in participation. You want to get as much as you can out on that one collection that you do, because that maximises the benefit at the end of the process. Where you're either generating electricity or generating, a reusable compost or solid matter. We all know that food waste is the expensive one. It's the one that costs a huge amount to collect. You'll never recover all of the cost of both the collection and disposal. So the best way to minimise the cost of introducing that service is to be as efficient as possible and get as much as you can, from the resident. And that's why I think in communications I was very keen on the caddy liner side of things, and that's given us. We still consistently in SK on our trial round have a participation rate of over 80%. It's really good in that respect. And actually, we've been doing this for a few years now, and we'd hoped at the beginning to see people reduce, because the message is reduce. It's this is something that, why are you throwing that food away when you should have eaten it, or you shouldn't have bought it in the first place? And if you shouldn't have bought it in the first place, you shouldn't have bought the packaging it came in and all of those things that come down the road too. And the interesting thing is that we've started to see now a reduction, but although participation stays high, we're seeing a reduction in the volumes that the householders are giving us. So, but it takes years. It's not an overnight thing, and we're still going to have that massive cost at the outset and those big logistical challenges, both at collection end and at disposal end, to deal with that. So that is the really big one. I mean, I've encouraged all of the members within South Kesteven to put their own consultation response in. I know I've done mine, but it was long, and it was lose the will to live. I don't know. In terms of garden waste and the free collection side of things, again, I just think this fosters inequality, because you're right, Matthew. Ultimately, all of the stuff that we do is paid for through taxation. It's the public service at the end of the day. And how do you justify to somebody on a low income who scrapes together to manage to pay their council tax the fact that they're subsidising somebody who's got a 2-acre garden to put a green bin outside the house? I really don't think that's fair in a society. And also, it doesn't. We've talked about reduce a little bit here. We should be encouraging people not to send their green waste to the household waste recycling centre and not to put it in the green bin, but to compost in their own gardens. If we don't get it, then it saves us, right at the outset. And one of the only ways you can do that is to actually charge, to make people think about their pocket and about how much it's costing them to put the grass cuttings from their lovely lawn into a green bin and have it taken away again. You promote people to reduce the waste that they give you and to think of alternate ways. And I'm not saying fly tip here, I'm saying compost in your garden and do other things and make mulch and all sorts of things like that, rather than give waste. And this is why it's kind of I'm in a quandary with regards to the whole consultation process from DEFRA on this one, because they seem to be promoting taking more waste when actually there should be massive emphasis through the whole process on reduce. And yes, there's a little bit in there, but by no means enough. Considering the challenges that we've got. I mean, we look at deposit return schemes. I mean, that's not going to. I don't think that's going to change the total volume of waste in the waste system. It is just going to shift some of it away from us and towards trade, probably. In terms of you buy your plastic bottle of water and then you with the 20p on, and then you can take it back to the shop or whatever. I don't know how it's going to work in that respect, but you'll be you can take your waste back to the shop and get your deposit back, but that it's just going to get chucked in a trade waste bin. We should be promoting people using reusable containers for water, and that they're able to go through all of our towns in all of our cities and places in the country and be able to walk in somewhere and say, excuse me, can you just give me some tap water because I would like a drink, and give you you should be able to do that. I think it's just bonkers that we've got such a situation where we spend so much on bottled water, and that in itself provides the plastic a huge amount of plastic waste that we've got to deal with. So I mean, I'm very supportive of the end result from the conversations that have been going on with the officers and the members on the part in the partnership on the response. I just think that the challenge ahead of us is huge. We do have to sit and wait and see what they'll decide. I've got everything crossed that they won't go for free green waste collections, and I'm got everything crossed that they'll come up with a plan that at least reduces some of the financial burden that is implicit within food waste collections, that's going to get lumped onto councils in a time where budgets are tight anyway. So I mean, I'll leave it there anyway, but thank you for the report, Matthew.
Thank you. And yes, I would certainly agree in terms of minimisation, and I think it's one of the ongoing balances in my mind, that yield is seen as a good thing. A lot of what DEFRA say, it's about how can we get more food waste, how can we get more green waste, how can we get more stuff being recycled. But in the end, actually, whilst it's better to recycle something than to throw it away, than to dispose of it, it's better not to produce it in the first place. And it's how to get those messages across to the public when we've spent the whole time really I've been working in waste management. The focus has been tell people recycling is a good thing. But actually, I'd love us to get to the point where if somebody puts something in their recycling bin, they think, well, this is good, but it would be better if I wasn't throwing it away at all. But it's how to get that balance, because clearly we'd rather they recycle it than they put it in their other bin. But yes, thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Richard?
Thank you, Matthew. It's not. Oh, I was going to say food for thought, but that's the wrong expression, isn't it? It's food for disposal. I mean, I agree with a lot with this. Pete's just said there. With the green waste, when we introduced the charge at NK, I very much the comms on that was it was a fairness tax. That it's only fair that the people that produce the most green waste pay more, because it's as you say, we all know, as Pete said very eloquently, about equalities and why should people pay when they shouldn't. So I really would not want to see them bring in free grass collection again. With regards to the bottle return scheme, there's just a small hole in the what's been quoted as the direction of travel at the moment when they're talking about 10 and 20p for returning a plastic bottle. Well, there's a certain national supermarket where every little helps that when you can buy 2 litres of carbonated water for 17p, then how they're going to set a price, or a return cost on taking a bottle back, it just doesn't work. And I'm also concerned about where they think all those return bottles will go, because even though at the moment there's still the recycling to be considered now. I went to an event 2 years ago up in Glasgow, in Edinburgh, sorry, and they were talking about the bottle return scheme in Glasgow and selling it as being almost carbon neutral. And I said, well, when you put all those plastic bottles through your shredder and then introduce all the new plastic that you have to actually make it a viable product and start distributing it out, I'm sorry, but that's not carbon neutral, So what they're trying to achieve by it and directing it that way will be interesting. I think they should be concentrating more on how we actually deal with recyclates in this country and make sure that what we recycle is recycled properly. If we can't reduce down the amount that we're producing in the first place. But when we move on to food waste, I think we've got to look at what the best practice is as well and do that very quickly. I've had some information from Bracknell. They introduced food waste collections last March, and from what I've been told by their leader, then they moved to they collected double the tonnage that they expected, and they've negated their costs by actually going to a weekly food collection, 2 weekly dry recycling, and a 3-week residual. Because by the time they're taking all the stuff out that causes the smells in the residual, then there was no need to keep to 2 weekly. And apparently the residents down there are loving it. So I think we need to make sure we all look very quickly and, if need be, take the decisions we need to take, which have been avoided in the past. Because as soon as you start talking about not emptying people's bins on a schedule that the press agree with, then obviously they start the campaign. So I think there's some work that we've got to do very quickly, but we shouldn't also be reinventing the wheel. If there's good practice out there, best practice that works, then that's what we need to be looking at.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. I would say I agree with what you've said. The only slight issue is that one of the proposals DEFRA are making is to put restrictions on frequency of residual waste collections. So there may be a requirement for residual waste collections to remain at least fortnightly. It is a proposal which ourselves and a number of authorities I know think is a foolish requirement, given that by taking food waste out, you're reducing the quantity and reducing the potential smelliness of that waste, and therefore it would only be sensible to be able to collect it less frequently. But it is one of the proposals that's on the table, and we shall have to wait and see.
Yeah, I did, as Pete did, I did death by consultation with and I did my own responses, and I did comment on that because I think it's just political rather than practical.
Come back, Pete.
I did, in support of what Richard was saying about the 3 weekly residual. It's interesting because very shortly after we started collecting people's food waste, we actually started receiving letters off people saying, I put that little in my black bin now. It doesn't need collecting every 2 weeks. You could go to 3 or 4 weeks, and I think I think everybody who's participated has experienced that, because it is a shift in the way that you divide the waste out. You're taking a lot of what goes in the black bin is food. Quite often it's in packaging that's just been wasted as well. But if you're taking the food out of the packaging, putting it in a caddy, you're then recycling the packaging in your grey bin or whatever colour your recycling bin is. Then you do see a significant reduction in what goes into the residual. And I think DEFRA would be shooting themselves in the foot if they were putting restrictions and suggesting that you couldn't judge as a partnership or as a district or as a collection authority or whatever how best to collect the volumes of waste that you were that you were picking up. So yeah, ultimately we are going to go to 3 weekly residual, which fits in well with if you want to do paper card 1 week, plastics and glass the next week, and then paper card the 3rd week, and then residual, and so on. So it fits in well there. But that was in support of what Richard was saying. I think that's the way it will end up.
Thank you, Peter. Don't see any. I saw Owen come on the screen. Did you want to speak?
No, thank you, Chairman. My connection dropped momentarily, but thank you.
No problem. So everyone happy with that? Paper?
Yeah.
Yep. So thank you, Matthew. And that brings us to the last one, which is the forward plan. So obviously it's all for noting, but is there anything that anyone wants to add? Hello?
Danny, can I just ask, it's a formal plan. It's a formal plan, but can I also ask, we talked about informal and the chance to have extra meetings. That if we get, if we start to get information firmed up from government ahead of our scheduled meetings, if we start to get more from the Environment Bill and more from the DEFRA side, then that we can actually call a meeting so we can deal with it rather than be looking at it after the horse has bolted. Although there's obviously going to be years of implications on this, the earlier we can look at it and start to put plans together, the better.
Yeah, cool with that. Anyone else got his put on? No, seeing none. So if anyone does think of anything, then by all means just email it through, and we can add it on at a later date or before the next meeting or something. So that's it. I thank you all for coming today.